The desert sun bore down on Cedar Flats like a judgment. Dust swirled along the wooden sidewalks as Rira swept the porch of Murphy's General Store, in her faded dress blending in like a shadow nobody noticed. For 2 years she had worn this quiet life like a disguise, an obedient clerk, polite and forgettable. But under that calm exterior lay the bones of another life, one forged in federal service, hardened by betrayal and buried under a false name. No one here knew she used to carry a badge heavier than most men could bear, and that suited her just fine. Gunshots shattered the morning stillness, 3 cracks that echoed off the saloon walls, followed by shouts and the frantic pounding of hooves. Rira dropped her broom, her gaze snapping to the narrow alley across the street, where a figure stumbled into view. He was Apache tall blood soaking through torn buckskin at the shoulder. Dust and sweat clung to his face, but his eyes, sharp, proud, burning with pain, met hers for a single electric second. Behind him, Townsend's voice roared, "Find that red devil, he's leaking too much blood to get far." Rira's breath caught. Every instinct told her to look away, pretend she saw nothing. But her body moved before her mind caught up. She ran across the street, grabbed the Apache's good arm, and pulled him toward the back of the store. The storage room was cramped and dim, filled with grain sacks and shadows. She whispered this way, knowing he might not understand, but he followed. The law of Cedar Flats was simple: shoot first, bury later. By helping him, she wasn't just breaking the rule. She was crossing a line no one came back from. As the townsfolk gathered to hunt, Rira crouched beside the wounded Apache, pressing strips of her petticoat to his wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Outside, boots thundered across the boardwalks, voices barking orders. She prayed they wouldn't find them. But when Townsend finally burst into the storage room, rage carved into every crease of his weathered face, it was already too late. They dragged the Apache out roughly, and Townsend turned on Rira like a man betrayed. "Treason," he growled. "You helped the enemy." That evening, as judgment fell and the crowd cried for exile, Rira saw a figure leaning against the blacksmith's wall, tall, lean, dressed in trail dust. Garrett Walsh. She hadn't seen him in years, but those pale blue eyes hadn't changed. He tipped his hat at her, the gesture casual, the meaning unmistakable. "I see you, and I'm not done with you yet." The town square boiled with fury as the people of Cedar Flats formed a tight circle around Rira, their faces etched with betrayal. Her hands were still stained with Apache blood, Swift Eagle's blood, but it wasn't compassion they saw, only treason. Townsend's voice rang out like a gavel. 23 years we fed her, sheltered her, and this is how she repays us, by hiding one of them savages. Even those who once greeted her with kind nods now looked at her like a loaded gun pointed their way. She stood tall, her voice clear. He was wounded. I helped a dying man. But the crowd wasn't listening. Fear had taken hold, fed by raids, by rumors, by the easy lie that every Apache was the enemy. Townsend's sentence dropped like a blade exile at sunrise. No food, no water, no second chances. Just 1 hour to leave town or face the rope. Back in the tiny room behind Murphy's store, Rira threw a few belongings into a canvas bag, her hands shaking, not with fear but with restraint. She had promised herself to never wear the badge again, never open the oilcloth-wrapped bundle at the bottom of her trunk. But as the voices of angry men gathered outside to make sure she was leaving, she knew that promise was over. Slowly, she unwrapped the worn leather and gleaming silver, a U.S. Federal Marshal badge. Not the tin star of a local sheriff, but the authority of Washington itself. The name engraved on the back, Isabella Castellanos, still caught the light like a truth long buried. She pinned it to her vest, then checked the pistol under her spare dress. 6 bullets, and if Garrett Walsh was really here, she might need every one. The desert swallowed her footsteps as she walked east out of town, past the last fence posts, and into the empty wild. But she wasn't walking blindly. Every step was a calculation. 3 miles out, she reached a cluster of red rock she'd scouted long ago, a hidden shelter with water cached beneath stones. She crouched under the outcrop and lit a small signal fire, sending thin smoke into the blue sky. Then she flashed her mirror in a coded sequence toward the distant ridges, an old marshal's distress call. If anyone was still watching, still loyal, they'd come. But Walsh had always been faster. She heard them before she saw them, hooves pounding like thunder. Townsend's men, 5 riders, rope in hand, and hanging back like a vulture, Walsh watched. He hadn't come to arrest her. He'd come to bury her. When the first bullet struck the rocks above her head, Rira ducked low and returned fire. 1 man screamed and fell. 4 left. She counted every shot, every movement, every breath. But what chilled her wasn't the gunmen, it was the cold gleam in Walsh's eyes. This wasn't about an Apache. It was about Denver, about the agents who died, about secrets she was never supposed to survive. Smoke rose in a thin gray line above the red rocks, barely visible against the blinding desert sky. Rira crouched low, shielding the fragile flame from the wind as she fed it dry brush, then angled her mirror toward the ridges beyond Copper Bend. 3 long flashes, 2 short, 3 long again. It was the oldest signal in the Federal Marshal Code Officer in distress. It had been years since she'd used it, years since she'd dared to believe anyone might still be watching. But if Hayes or any of the old guard were out there, if anyone still trusted the name Isabella Castellanos, this was the only chance she had left. The wind stirred her hair as she crouched beside the fire pistol in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. The badge on her chest felt heavier now, not from shame, but from the weight of everything it meant to reclaim. She wasn't just surviving. She was calling for war. The hoofbeats came first, steady, deliberate 5 riders moving in a half-moon pattern, searching for her with the precision of men who'd done this before. Rira slipped into the crevice between 2 rocks, counting boots, watching shadows stretch across the sand. Then she saw him. Garrett Walsh perched high on his saddle, not with the reckless swagger of a cowboy, but the calculating stillness of a man used to commanding bloodshed. He wasn't just here to watch, he was orchestrating. As Townsend shouted commands and his men moved like a coordinated unit, Rira felt the truth settle in her chest like ice. This wasn't just about Cedar Flats. This was about Denver, Morrison, Davidson, Chen. They'd all died because someone inside the marshals had sold them out. And now that someone was 15 yards away giving kill orders, like he was still part of the team. Rira steadied her breathing, checked her rounds. 5 shots left and smiled grimly. They thought she was just a store clerk playing hero. They were about to remember who she really was. Just as the 4th rifle crack echoed off the canyon wall, a thunder rose, not the echo of gunfire, but the low rolling drumbeat of hooves. Rira glanced toward the western ridge, breath-catching. At first, it looked like a dust storm, but then the silhouettes sharpened, riders, dozens of them, emerging like ghosts from the high ground. At their front rode a man she knew by posture alone, Samuel Hayes, weathered stone-faced the marshal who'd once trained her to track men across 2 territories without leaving a footprint. His voice thundered across the canyon, Federal Marshal Service. Drop your weapons and stand down. Townsend's men froze. They had come to hang a woman. Now they stood face to face with a detachment of armed federal officers. The odds had shifted, and every man knew it. Rira stepped out from behind the rock's badge, gleaming pistol raised. Her voice cut through the dust like a blade. Garrett Walsh. He's the leak from Denver. He sold us out. For a heartbeat, the canyon held its breath. Walsh's face didn't change, but his eyes narrowed, just a flicker of calculation. Then his gun cleared leather, and he turned, not on her, but on Townsend. 1 shot. Townsend grunted, staggered, and collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest. Chaos erupted. Walsh wheeled his horse and bolted for the canyon mouth, spurring hard. If he reached the narrow pass, he'd vanish into the desert, and with him the truth. Rira didn't hesitate. She dropped to one knee, exhaled, and fired. Once, twice. Both bullets hit center mass. Walsh pitched forward, hit the sand hard, and didn't move. The silence afterward was deafening. Dust settled, horses stamped nervously. Hayes rode down into the canyon slowly, his men fanning out in formation. He dismounted beside Rira, eyes scanning Walsh's still body before turning to her. "Marshal Castellanos," he said at last, using her real name for the first time in years. "Hell of a shot." Rira stood slowly, pistol still warm in her hand. Around them, Townsend's men dropped their rifles one by one, understanding they'd been pawns in someone else's game. In the distance, more riders approached townspeople, led by Doc Peterson and Murphy, their faces pale with guilt. They had driven her out to die, but now they came not as accusers but as witnesses, and maybe if they had the courage, as allies. They came riding in like penitents. Doc Peterson at the front, face hollow with shame, followed by Murphy, Martha Henley, and half a dozen townsfolk who had voted for Rira's exile just hours ago. Their horses were slick with sweat, eyes wide with exhaustion and guilt. Doc pulled a crumpled telegram from his vest and dismounted with shaking hands. "After you left," he said, breath ragged, "we got a wire from Fort Collins about Walsh, about what really happened in Denver, about you." Hayes took the message, but Rira didn't need to read it. She could see it in their faces, they finally knew. "It says you're a decorated marshal." Doc continued, "been working undercover for 2 years. Said you were protecting settlers, not betraying them." Murphy stepped forward, hat in hand. "And Swift Eagle," he added, "we thought he was raiding us. Turns out he's been sabotaging Castellanos' gun routes, trying to warn us." The words landed like stones in a dry well. Rira said nothing. There was nothing left to explain. Only the bitter truth that their fear had nearly cost them everything. Hayes read the rest of the telegram aloud, his voice tight. "Castellano isn't just running guns anymore. He's planning something bigger. Massive weapons shipments, enough to arm 500 Apache warriors." The implication hit like a rifle butt to the gut. 500 armed men misled into believing genocide was coming. Rira's thoughts spun. She'd hunted Castellano once, 8 months undercover, bleeding through lies and fire to bring him down. And then Denver happened. The betrayal, the deaths, her exile. Now he was back, not just dealing arms, but manufacturing war. "He wants both sides to think they're under attack," Rira murmured. "He feeds the tribe's lies about military raids and the settlers' lies about Apache uprisings. They kill each other, and he gets rich selling them both the bullets." Martha Henley stepped forward, eyes brimming with tears. "We didn't know, Rira. We thought we were protecting ourselves. We thought you thought mercy was betrayal." Rira cut in voice, low and steel-edged. "You looked at a bleeding man and saw an enemy. And you looked at me and saw a traitor." Silence fell. No one met her eyes. But Rira saw something shift in their posture, not just guilt, but resolve. These people had been cowards once. Now they stood trembling but present. Hayes looked between them and the horizon, so he said evenly, "What's the play?" Rira stared into the west, where the sun was sinking fast and war was rising with the night. "We stop Castellano," she said, "tonight, before dawn." A single sentence, sharp as a blade. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about justice. Inside the dim jailhouse behind Murphy's saloon, Swift Eagle sat upright, blood crusted on his shoulder eyes, alert but unreadable. When Rira stepped into the cell wearing her badge again, he nodded once, not in surprise but in quiet recognition. "You are not who they thought you were," he said in English as smooth as the canyon wind. Neither are you, she replied, unlocking the cell. We need to talk. About Castellano. About the weapons. As Hayes entered behind her, Swift Eagle rose, slowly favoring his wounded side, but standing like a man with something sacred to protect. Castellano has moved crates of rifles cases of powder, he said. He tells our young ones the white soldiers will soon destroy the sacred grounds. He has forged orders, created maps, shown them fake plans of army movements. And White Hawk believes him. Rira's throat tightened. White Hawk, respected war chief, once peaceful, now convinced he must strike first to save his people. When she asked, Swift Eagle's voice dropped to a whisper. Before sunrise, they will attack Copper Canyon Supply Depot at dawn. The room went still. Hayes cursed softly. That depot's got medical supplies, blankets, rations. If it gets hit, the army'll think it's war. Rira's mind spun through every bad outcome. If White Hawk attacked, settlers would panic. Militias would retaliate, the army would deploy in full force, and Castellano would vanish richer and bloodless. If we warn the army, she said, they'll defend the depot, and we'll start a firefight anyway. If we go to the Apache, they won't believe us. But Castellano, if we take him alive and force him to confess, we have a chance. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You know where he is? Swift Eagle nodded. Dead Horse Canyon, 5 miles north. He moves often, but I watched his scouts. Tonight he camps there. 20 guards. We go now, Rira said. We hit fast quiet, and we don't kill him unless we have to. Outside, the group gathered in the cooling twilight. Hayes briefed his 15 marshals. Rira addressed the townspeople, now armed with shame, and borrowed rifles. You don't have to come, she said. You already did enough. But one by one they stepped forward. Doc Peterson tightened his saddle and said, There'll be wounded. I'm coming. Murphy nodded grimly. Even Martha Henley raised her chin. I'm not good with a gun, but I'm not good with cowardice anymore either. Swift Eagle stood beside Rira now, silent but steady. Hayes gave her a glance of quiet respect. Mixed force, he said. Trained marshals, untrained civilians, Apache scout. We've seen worse odds. We've never seen this kind of reason, Rira answered. We're not riding for vengeance. We're riding to stop a lie. And as the first stars broke through the sky, the ragtag coalition mounted up and rode north toward a canyon of death and the last chance to stop a war. The walls of Dead Horse Canyon loomed like gravestones under the moonlight, jagged and cold. Rira lay flat against the rock ledge, rifle resting on her arm, breath shallow. Through the scope, she counted 23 men, 3 more than Swift Eagle had reported, gathered around a fire where Castellano stood silver-haired and ageless, pointing at maps like a general orchestrating genocide. Hayes's marshals flanked the northern rise while the townspeople clung to shadows in the south. Swift Eagle circled the back trail alone, silent as myth. The signal came the low call of a canyon bird. Rira stood. Her badge caught the firelight. Castellano, she shouted. Federal Marshal Service. You're under arrest. For a second time, froze. Then hell broke loose. Gunfire lit the canyon like lightning. Marshals opened fire with precision, while the townsfolk fired wild fear in every shot. Rira kept her rifle trained on Castellano, who didn't flinch. He raised his hands slowly, unarmed. Marshal Castellanos, he drawled. You've aged well. She took a step closer, fury cold and focused. It ends tonight. He smiled, cold, calculating. It ends when truth is revealed. Then chaos surged. One of the townsmen, Harlan Pike the blacksmith, turned and fired into the back of Murphy's shoulder. Murphy screamed and dropped blood spraying. For the white race, Harlan yelled, eyes wild. She's siding with savages, Rira spun, and shot him through the leg before he could fire again. You just picked the wrong war, she hissed. Hayes dragged Harlan away, but the damage was done. The line was breaking. From the rear, a scream echoed. Rira turned just in time to see Swift Eagle fall, a knife buried in his ribs. Castellanos' last scout had slipped through. Rira sprinted through fire and smoke, dropping the attacker with 2 shots. She dropped to her knees beside Swift Eagle, who clutched the wound, breath rattling. "I must live," he rasped, blood bubbling on his lips. White Hawk must hear the truth. Rira tore open her belt pouch, stuffing herbs and cloth into the wound, pressing hard. "Then you will live," she said through clenched teeth. "You're not dying here. Not tonight." Around them, Castellanos' men were crumbling. The marshals advanced in formation, but Castellano himself still hadn't moved. He watched it all burn like an emperor in ruins, eyes gleaming, waiting for his moment to strike. Rira stood and leveled her rifle, knowing the final confrontation was moments away, and the war would be decided not by armies, but by truth and the barrel of a gun. Castellano stood alone now, smoke curling around him, blood staining his coat from the shoulder where Rira's bullet had ripped through. She advanced slowly, rifle leveled at his chest, the others forming a tightening circle. "You shot me," he muttered, eyes incredulous. "I shot your gun arm," she replied coldly. "You'll live." Long enough to speak. Hayes stepped in iron in his voice. "You're going to confess to both sides, everything, the guns, the lies, the forged orders." Castellano chuckled, teeth red. "You think words can undo what I've set in motion?" "No," Rira said, lowering her rifle just slightly. "But your face might." He spat at her boots. "This country was built on war. I just reminded it who it really is." "Then you'll remind it of what it can choose not to become," she snapped. "Because this time the blood stays in your mouth, not on our hands." As dawn approached, Swift Eagle, pale and weak, but alive, leaned against Doc Peterson in the back of the supply wagon. His voice was gravel. "We ride now. I will bring Castellano to White Hawk. He will hear the truth through fire, through ceremony." Rira nodded. "We'll go with you. Hayes and I will take the confession, the weapons documents, the coded maps. The army will hear our side, too." Hayes looked grim. "And if either side doesn't believe, then we buy time," Rira answered, "with every ounce of truth we have left." They loaded Castellano onto a horse, bound but conscious. The former mastermind of chaos was now just cargo, his only value, the poison in his mind now exposed to daylight. "He'll speak," Swift Eagle said, voice steady. "Our people have rituals that tear lies from the tongue, and he fears being remembered as the man who lied to warriors." Rira met his gaze. "And we'll make damn sure the settlers remember him the same way." By midday, messengers were already galloping toward Copper Canyon with sealed orders and a marshal's signature. Hayes's badge carried weight, and with Castellano's confession in ink and blood, the army would stand down. Another team rode south toward Apache territory, bearing Swift Eagle's words and the prisoner himself. Rira remained behind, overlooking the canyon where dust was still settling, blood still drying on the rocks. Doc stepped beside her quietly. "You did it?" She didn't respond right away. "No, we bought time," she said finally. "What we do with it decides if this peace lasts longer than the sunrise." In the wind that swept through the canyon, she no longer heard gunfire, just breath, just quiet. And in that stillness, she realized the war had almost happened. Not because of weapons, but because good people waited too long to stand up, and this time they hadn't. The ride back to Cedar Flats was quiet, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from reckoning. The same people who had cast Rira into the desert now rode behind her, Doc Peterson with his medical bag, Murphy with a makeshift sling, and even Martha Henley Dust on her bonnet, and apology in her eyes. As they passed the outskirts of town, folks gathered near the saloon, not to gawk this time, but to listen. Hayes dismounted, first walked to the center of the street, and raised his voice. "This woman saved your town, saved this territory, saved a war from lighting up the whole damn West." Then he turned to Rira and said, "For everyone to hear, you ever think of wearing the star again?" Murphy stepped forward awkwardly, hat in hand. "Sheriff's badge is yours if you want it. And this time we don't mean to forget who you really are." Rira looked at the crowd faces that once burned with judgment, now softened by truth. Slowly she reached up and pinned the 5-pointed silver star beside her marshal badge. "Then let's build something better," she said, "together." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Swift Eagle stood beside her outside Murphy's, his wound bandaged, his posture proud. The townsfolk kept their distance, unsure of the lines they'd once drawn with hate. Rira turned to him. "You should know they want me to be sheriff." "Will they let you?" he asked. She smiled, tired but firm. "They'll learn to." Then she handed him a deputy's badge, worn but polished. "I don't want a deputy," she said. "I want a bridge between their world and yours." Swift Eagle looked at the badge, then at the people watching from windows and porches. "I will be your bridge," he said. "If they let me speak, I will help them listen. If they forget again, I will remind them." They stood side by side beneath the blood-orange sky, not sheriff and deputy, not settler and Apache, but two people who had bled for peace. That night in the room behind Murphy's store, Rira stood before the cracked mirror. The woman staring back wasn't Sarah Mitchell, the shop clerk. She wasn't just the fugitive or the exile. She was all of them and something more. She unwrapped the oilcloth bundle one last time, not to hide it again, but to lay it in the open. The marshal's badge, the pistol, the letter of commission creased but intact. "Isabella Castellanos," she whispered. "Marshal, sheriff, survivor." And then she folded it all carefully and locked it in the desk drawer, not to forget it, but to carry it forward. As she stepped outside, the breeze lifted the hem of her coat, the silver badge gleaming against her chest. From this day forward, Cedar Flats would not be ruled by fear. Not while she wore the star. She had come here seeking silence. She found her voice. She had been thrown out as a traitor. She returned as the guardian of justice. Marshal Isabella Castellanos was home.